then you measure the effectiveness of these investments, and then you provide the lift.
Images may appear to be identical, but looks can be deceiving. The difference is not always obvious. It has to be discovered. There are always different sides to a story. We put the focus on the details. To see more, to understand better. CGTN. See the difference.
So I want to follow up on that, Yixin, if you can, contributing about the artificial intelligence, just use it as an example. How can there be more access of contribution for women in both developing the technologies and also in the applications of the technologies, particularly being aware of the gender equity? And of course for men as well, who are doing these technologies, what actually needs to be done given your track record? Because you see everything is just so easy. So I'm sure you have some talking points too. Please.
Well, I agree with what you shared earlier about when technology companies develop AI or a new technology, it is very important to have the women perspective to be incorporated at the development level. Similar to public policies, we always talk about gender mainstreaming, gender mainstreaming in terms of budget. Yeah, it is the same. I feel that if we have enough women to be at the decision-making level to begin with, then at the developmental level of any technology and any solution, the women and the female perspective will be considered, and it will not be an afterthought. I think that is the underlying fundamental, that if we can solve that first, it's like many things can be overcome, and we don't have to really pick it up and say, you have not done this and you should have done that. But something that I would like to address in this room, and I've been trying to hold back, is that this session, we should be talking to the man, but looking at the percentage of, male and female in this room, I feel that we are talking to ourselves.
Well, I do see some percentage
but thank you to all our male colleagues who are here to support this session for whatever reason that you are here. We really hope that you can bring this message out of this conference hall and share it with the rest of your male counterparts who actually sit on the boardroom. I think that will be the more important conversation that we should have, because then the perception issue that we have, the discrimination or the imaginative discrimination that we have, or whatever the glass ceiling that, something that I don't believe that actually exists, still do exist in many parts of the world.
Yeah, I hope they're all watching this live stream on the internet. But Anne, please.
No,
briefly.
I could not agree more. I think we need disproportionate support from men in order to make this a true equality. And sometimes hard target helps. At our company, we actually put hard target. By 2025, PepsiCo making a commitment that 50% of all the managerial levels need to be women. So women hold up half the sky. Literally needs to be 50%. We are already 44%. 2 years ago, we're already 44, and in Greater China, we're 57. So that's the type of a number that we need to task ourselves in order to hit. If you don't measure it, you don't get it. So I couldn't agree more. And I think as organizations, we have the responsibility, and we need to deliver against our commitment in order to do that.
Sabine?
Yeah, so I agree with what you said. And I'm going to go back to your STEM question, because we do have that gap, and it does exist, right? And I'm also a mother, and I have 2 boys in their 20s, and I have a daughter who's 11. So when she was born, we were very conscious in making sure that she had access to technology and engineering toys and all of these things. But I'm seeing that girls her age especially, their confidence starts to go down, And so I've been speaking to a lot of educators and other people to find out where is this coming from. So number one, there is bias in the educational system still, right? Maybe it's the textbooks. Maybe the textbooks have examples that relate more to boys. Maybe it uses sports or something that relates more to boys. Maybe there's not representation of females in those examples. Maybe teachers are giving more attention to male students. So as educators and parents, we need to start very young to understand where are these issues coming from.
And
now,
it's certainly not just coming from schools, it's also coming from society.
From society. Now also, again, we will have differences where we look in Asia, but access to resources. So in Pakistan, for example, a girl and a woman will not have access to phones the same as males, like men and boys will. They won't have access to technology and laptops the same. So those are two very concrete examples of, how that exists. And then the third thing is representation. Representation is still very important. Yes, we have days of the year where we celebrate women in technology and girls in science, but for a girl to see it, she has to see it to believe it. She has to see it to be it. So we need to continue to put out those stories of males and women, both girls and boys, for girls to really be able to thrive in STEM.
I'm glad that we are doing this right now, right? About the professional and also the social roles of women. Because we are usually being asked, how do you balance between your professional career and your family life as women entrepreneurs or women business leaders? What about for you? What do you see these roles are? And how, is there a balance that we need to take? Or what about for the other half of the sky as well? Very briefly, before we go to our
Sure,
audience
so I think
questions.
when we look at women who are in careers, whether it's in corporate or women entrepreneurs, they have the burden of balancing their family and their life. They have social, cultural issues. I think something I want to add in here, we've always had the issue of childcare and taking care of that, but added to that is caregiving responsibilities for elderly parents now, and this is becoming increasingly important. And I think this is something that, we are coming up with so many solutions for childcare for our children, but we need to actually look at solutions as well, because I think Asian culture really takes pride in taking care of our parents. We don't put our parents in group homes and residential homes. We take care of our family, and this is becoming increasingly difficult, and it's harder for women than men. So I think we need to come up with solutions, not only that help us take care of family members elderly, but then also coming up with solutions that address the stress that caregivers face, because a lot of women face burnout from caregiving as well, and they're trying to balance that with their businesses and their work. So,
especially in Asia, where many societies are still observing filial piety, which many believe is a wonderful tradition for the societies here in this region. And for you?
Well, very, very quickly, I would like to take on the government perspective and what governments can do. I think the role of public policy become very important here. For example, ensuring that childcare is very accessible, is very affordable, can actually be very encouraging for especially young mothers to come back to work instead of quitting the job for 10 years while waiting for the kids to grow up and go to school. I think those are small actions that can be easily done as long as the government is willing. And of course, corporate sectors, well, again, it has to come with mandatory legislation to ensure that maternity leave is at least 3 months, to encourage female to not only focus on their careers, but also not forgetting that they may also want to be mothers. And other than that, it will be the entire ecosystem and supporting role that the entire society will have to take on, not only from family or your own spouse, but the entire stakeholders, your colleagues, your friends, your families, and your entire social safety network that will come together to help raise the child and families together. I think those are really important.
Yes, indeed. Devils are also in the details, right?
We'll
Please,
just
Anne.
add two things. One is to have the safety net, the flexibility to support. They will have a different pace to career. So how do we actually ensure that they're not missing out because that they actually opt for a different pace, providing that the childcare or the family support, encourage the men associates to share the responsibility as well. We provide most of the times, maternity leave. How about paternity leave? Right. So how do we encourage male to also share the proportional responsibility? And I say the last one is be cognizant of these situations and these needs. And a lot of times just have the dialogue, because a lot of women, what we realize is that without necessarily speaking up, they actually opt out because of these trade-offs. So how do we actually have that dialogue with the female associates to say that, hey, going back to the flexibility and then the safety net, you don't have to opt out and you can still have a very successful career.
Communication, quality communication, whether in one family or in a society, extremely important. 张女士。
对，因为我呢是比较赞同，我觉得因为刚才一直强调的话。
I agree with those opinions. I've stressed that there's no difference between male and female in the workplace. Although in households there are labor divisions, I believe that when a woman chooses to give birth to children and be a mother, she has to shoulder her responsibilities. Two things are very important. First, women should adapt. They cannot afford to be very anxious. Second, they should arrange their schedule more reasonably. As entrepreneurs as well as mothers, women can show their resilience. With thorough planning, there is no contradiction between the two roles, and children can also learn from their mothers and feel their power.
你要发挥女性的那个韧性，然后呢安排好了以后，它本身是不矛盾的，因为孩子呢从你的身上，他能感知到一种力量。
I know many of you have brilliant questions and also some thoughts about many of the issues we discussed. Feel free, raise your hand. We welcome questions from both sides of the aisle, both gender.
My question for the panel is that I was looking at the chart from WEF on gender gap report, and it was very interesting to see a sharp declining once women reach director level, and to make the last mile to VP and C-suite. I'm wondering, as the business leader in the forefront, what is your insight? What is stopping them for closing that last mile, and how can we, together, men and women, helping them?
It's a combination of a lot of factors. The glass ceiling does exist, but it's improving. I think people tend to, promote and then include the people that they find alike to themselves. So when you have like a historical factor of male-dominated C-suite and boardrooms, there is that tendency. But it is indeed improving. But then that needs to be done intentionally. So what we have done is actually we talked about actually setting target for ourselves, and also actually providing a lot of those tools, trainings, development programs. And therefore, just the last piece is, if you look at the latest, one of the Fortune piece that was done a while ago of the top, 500 Fortune 500 company CEOs, 46 are women, so still a disproportionate small number, but above 10% of them come from PepsiCo.
I wanted to add a point to 2 points. One, that in Asia, the gap is wider.
Yeah.
And of course, it takes into consideration healthcare and economic opportunities, and there's multiple levels in that report. I was in Canada recently, and I saw a report that during COVID, more Asian women left than non-Asian women. And that was something that I haven't read more about that, but I'm interested to find out, is it our cultural, is it the family expectations? What is it that not only in Asia, but women who are in the diaspora or living outside of Asia, why did they also feel that they had to quit work during COVID more than non-Asians? So I'm curious about that. I've just thrown another question, sorry.
This panel is not here to provide all the solutions. But we are also here as a humble student, just like all of you, so that we can make differences in the near future. So once again, I want to thank you, our panelists, and also for the men and the women sitting here as the audience today. Thank you. 谢谢大家。
CGTN, China Global Television Network. Live from London, this is The World Today.
Hello, I'm Paul Barber. Our top stories this hour. Southern Europe is scorched as the continent swelters on the brink of new record high temperatures. Pomp, ceremony and controversy. Pensions and human rights on the minds of the French as India's Prime Minister is guest of honour for Bastille Day. And where no mission has gone before, India launches its lunar probe to explore the south pole of the moon. The three-headed dog from the gates of hell is here and scorching its way across southern Europe. The Cerberus heatwave, named from Greek mythology, could be about to set a new temperature record for Europe if it passes 48.8 degrees in Italy. The rest of the region is sweltering as well, with the mercury expected to hover around 40 degrees in parts of Spain, France, Turkey and Greece, which is where we head to now, actually, and our correspondent Evangelo Sipsas, who is live in Athens. So, Evangelo, we can see the Acropolis there behind you. Just how hot is it? How does it feel?
It is very hot right now, I have to say. I mean, I've been sweating quite a lot, and I'm used to this weather. But don't take my word for it, actually. The temperature right now, as we speak, is about between 42 to 43 degrees Celsius, and that's in the shade. And of course, that's only parts that are here in the parts of the Greek capital. Now, if you go closer inward in rural areas, the temperatures are even higher from there. We're talking about in the mid 40s. So today is a very, very hot one. But also, this is going to continue sometime until tomorrow on Saturday, and the temperatures are going to rise even more than today. So we're going to be expecting the peak of the heat wave happening sometime tomorrow, Saturday afternoon. Now, it is quite difficult to be standing out here with the sun. You can feel this breeze that is coming in is a warm breeze, and it feels like opening a door of a sauna pretty much. There's a number of tourists that, despite this heat wave, have been coming here to the Parthenon to experience and see this monument. We spoke to some of those people earlier to see what are those tips that they can give us perhaps to stay cool, and this is what they had to tell us.
It is really hot. The minute you step out of anything air conditioned, it's like, so yeah, it is hot.
Here we've been catching taxis everywhere to help, and when you go on Google Maps and you put your trip as walking, comes up with like a weather warning saying we don't recommend you to walk.
Definitely drink lots of water, sunscreen, hat, scarf around the neck. Walk in the shade.
And that's what the government has been saying. Drink as much water as you can and stay in the shade.
So some really important tips there, Evangelo. These kind of temperatures are dangerous as well, aren't they, for health? What kind of steps are the authorities taking?
Yes, these temperatures are very dangerous, and specifically for those people who belong to the vulnerable group. Vulnerable group meaning those who have perhaps low blood pressure or even having issues of breathing, some breathing problems. The government has been advising people that belong to a vulnerable group, or those who are over the age of 62, stay indoors at least until the sun goes down. Drink as much as water as you can. Avoid any unnecessary travel. And if you're one of those people who is working in the public sector, they're advising them to stay home and work from home. You know, these kind of what we've been seeing during the COVID-19 pandemic. They're advising people to stay and work from there. Now, a lot of those people who cannot afford to turn on their air conditioning or have an air conditioning at home, there's a number of cooling centers for them to go and stay cool until the sun goes down, get some water, perhaps some refreshments so they can avoid this heat. Also, the municipality of Athens has been handing out a number of water bottles to people in the center of Athens to advise them to stay cool. But also, the fire brigade is on standby because with these temperatures and low humidity levels, it's a perfect combination for wildfires, as well as a lot of the outdoor museums, as the Parthenon. They're going to remain closed from 12 local time until 5 local time until next Wednesday, when these temperatures perhaps might start decreasing.
OK, Evangelo, we will let you find some shade. Thank you very much indeed for that. That's Evangelo Tsipras reporting from Athens in Greece. Well, Italy is also bracing itself for record-breaking heat as the Cerberus heatwave continues to push the mercury above 40 degrees across southern Europe. Our correspondent Giles Gibson reports from Rome.
When the temperature rises to dangerous levels, Rome's Civil Protection Agency is ready for action. At this command centre in the heart of the Italian capital, officers are closely monitoring every change in the weather, looking for any sign of a wildfire breaking out.
Abbiamo repentini cambiamenti climatici, passeremo da...
We have sudden changes in the weather. We go from waves of extreme heat to intense rainfall. Citizens need to understand that the world is changing much more rapidly. Institutions can go after the problem and search for the best way to facilitate change and protect people better.
E per poter mettere sempre più in protezione le persone.
For thousands of tourists at Rome's iconic sites, the heat threatens to make their days strolling around the Eternal City feel endless. Several tourists have collapsed while out sightseeing, which is why local authorities are urging visitors to download a special app that tells you where to find water. For Romans used to hot summers, there are some tricks of the trade.
You can find these water fountains, or nassoni, which the city authorities started installing in the 1870s all over Rome. The water is clean and cool, and you'll often see locals stopping to take a drink or even just to splash a bit of water on their face.
This extreme heat has been triggered by an area of high pressure named Cerberus, a three-headed dog that guards hell in Dante's Inferno.
Abbiamo un'alta pressione stabile e un'alta pressione che si propaga dal...
We have an area of stable high pressure which has spread from Africa towards Europe. This brought last year the hottest summer ever recorded in Europe, and this year we're very close to surpassing that record again. The problem is that with climate change, we're exceeding record after record.
E noi stiamo superando un record dopo l'altro.
Even with slightly cooler summers in the past, the city traditionally empties out in July and August, with those who can afford it fleeing the city for the beach or the mountains. For those who can't, it's simply a game of hide and seek, hiding from the sun and seeking out air conditioning or even just a scrap of shade. Giles Gibson for CGTN, Rome.
Ilan Kelman is Professor of Disasters and Health at University College London. Jamie Owen asked him what effects extreme heat has on the human body.
Basically, our body can no longer maintain our temperature. So we overheat, which shuts down our organs, and we also dehydrate, which shuts down our organs. Other problems can be the worsening air pollution or smoke from wildfires, so people with breathing difficulties like asthma have trouble. And then very sadly, a lot of people will say, well, I have to cool off, I need to go into the river or the sea. And we do see a lot of drownings from people not taking precautions, just trying to cool off. People who are old, children, and those who have long-term pre-existing health conditions are particularly at risk. Certainly babies have to be watched because they have a lot of skin, a lot of area, but not a lot of mass, and they can't really tell us I'm feeling hot. Many old people will live alone and not even be aware that they are overheating or in trouble. So we must always look on elderly people within our networks, particularly those who live alone.
So what are the quick fixes? I mean, how do you go about mitigating the risks if you simply can't leave these areas?
We definitely have to drink a lot of water, and we heard that from Italy and Greece. Avoid alcohol, avoid coffee, drink lots and lots of water, and really it's just about staying cool. With this length of heat wave, when it does not cool down at night, our bodies cannot adjust. And so it's wonderful to hear that Athens is opening cooling centers. We need more of those. But not everyone has that opportunity. If they miss work, they lose income, they don't eat, or they get fired. So really try and find some way to stay cool, stay out of the sun, drink lots and lots of water, and just be aware of how you're feeling, and definitely check on people around you to ensure that they are okay and not too hot. Southern Europe knows about heat. They do get it, and we've heard that wonderful measures that Greece is taking as well as Italy. The problem is now the extent of the heat waves and also the temperatures, which if they don't break records this year, they will eventually. So it is very hard to tell people stay at home or stay in cooling centers for several days in a row. It's very hard to tell agricultural workers to not go to work, and then that will have knock-on effects on our food supplies. So ultimately, no matter how hot it has been in the past, and Southern Europe has dealt with it and has been well prepared, we've a long way to go to be ready for the terrible temperatures that we are expecting in the future.
Really? I mean, this isn't a one-off. You think we should really get ready for more of this on a regular basis?
Unfortunately, this is going to be the norm rather than the extreme. We are going to have to look at our transportation networks because railway lines buckle in the heat, roads can become unsafe. If too many people use air conditioning, that's going to lead to power outages, and then none of us can stay cool. And at these temperatures, above 40 degrees Celsius with humidity, turning on a fan can actually dehydrate us faster because it simply blows hot, humid air onto us. So unfortunately, our cities are not ready for it, our employment structure is not ready for it, and our bodies simply cannot cope with these temperatures for an extended period.
In other news, one person has been injured in overnight drone strikes on Ukraine. The attacks happened in the central Dnipro region around the city of Kryvyi Rih. Ukraine claims most Iranian drones are now being intercepted before they reach their targets. Fighting has also continued on the ground around Bakhmut and the region of Soledar. Meanwhile, Russia claims the use of US and NATO satellites in Ukraine is heightening the risk of a direct armed clash with Moscow. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov says their continued supply could mean catastrophic consequences for Ukraine's allies. Well, the Black Sea grain export deal meant to avert a global food crisis may collapse within days. It allows Ukraine to safely export grain from major ports despite the current conflict. But Russia is threatening to withdraw from the agreement, as our correspondent Stephanie Fried reports from Kiev.
Igor has taken a hit on profits from the 120 hectares of wheat, barley, and sunflower crops he farms.
I've lost 70% of my income since the start of the full-scale invasion.
His plight is an accurate representation of Ukraine's agriculture industry.
We are losing millions. The farmers of Ukraine are losing millions of dollars.
The UN and Turkey brokered the Black Sea Initiative last July, stipulating Russia's consent to free movement of Ukraine's grain export vessels. But the ongoing conflict, mined and shelled fields, and crops devastated by the disastrous Kakhovka Dam explosion are impacting exports. At the same time, the limited number of ports specified in the deal means expensive overland shipping costs for farmers and exporters.
It was very expensive, and it was both uncomfortable for buyers and sellers, and it led to huge losses to Ukrainian farmers.
Days before the initiative is set to expire, the Kremlin is signaling reluctance to renew the deal.
Maybe like 20–25%. That the deal will be prolonged in a way it works now.
Nibelon exporters say moving goods via the Danube River is an option, but it's a slower, more expensive alternative. Ukraine is the world's top sunflower oil producer and one of the world's top 4 grain exporters. Failure to renew the Black Sea deal will cause global food prices to rise and further endanger countries on the brink of starvation, namely Sudan, Afghanistan, and Somalia. Stephanie Fried, CGTN, Kyiv, Ukraine.
Well, President Vladimir Putin says he offered Wagner soldiers the chance to continue fighting in Ukraine under a new commander following the recent failed mutiny. Putin told a leading Russian newspaper the offer was made to the Wagner's fighters at a meeting also attended by Yevgeny Prigozhin, the mercenary group's chief. Our correspondent Dasha Chernysheva reports from Moscow.
Well, indeed, as we have heard from the Russian President Vladimir Putin, a very rare and strong admission that Wagner Group does not exist legally. So he said the group is still there, but legally there is no such entity as the Wagner Group, because under the Russian law there could be no private military organizations in the country. And the Russian President has hinted that the Russian authorities are indeed to work on this matter. He said that was a complex matter subject to discussions at the Russian State Duma and within the Russian government. So we understand the authorities will be starting doing that. But in that meeting, according to the Russian president, he also said that the group could continue to fight for their motherland. As we have heard before, the Kremlin suggesting that the fighters have pledged their loyalty to the Russian president. So we understand they were offered several employment options to continue fighting, particularly under their commander and as a unit as they were. Now, interestingly, that statement raises many questions in Russia, as the Russian president has previously been saying that the group has received funding from the Russian state, $1 billion over the course of the 1 year since May 2022 to May 2023. So that raises indeed many questions. As to the Wagner Group at the moment, we have heard from the Belarusian authorities saying that the Wagner Group is now helping train the Belarusian soldiers. And indeed, that is just in the correspondence with the statement we have heard before from Belarus and Alexander Lukashenko, suggesting that Wagner Group could be very useful in sharing the first-hand combat experience with the Belarusian army.
Dasha Chernysheva in Moscow there. Well, the supply of US cluster bombs to Ukraine is controversial amongst Washington's allies. Concern revolves around their deadly long-term legacy. Thousands of civilians have died in areas where they landed, not least in Laos, which is still dealing with the weapons that were dropped there 50 years ago during the Vietnam War. Our correspondent, Dusita Salkau, reports.
Sometimes it starts with a nightmare to realize peace. Sometimes that nightmare just never ends. Sometimes the most peaceful places hide the most tragic scars, because it's what you cannot see that has shattered the lives of people in this remote village. A decade ago, it was just a normal day. Young boys doing what they usually do, playing, throwing around a small round object they found in the forest. Intrigued, they tried to cut it open with a knife. A few strikes, then an earth-shaking explosion. A sound that haunts still, even to this day.
I picked up my grandson's wounded body. He died from the explosion. I always think about this incident when I work, eat. I always think about it.
The older generation here lived through the war. They believed it ended. But this incident that left 3 dead reminds them that they are just merely surviving peace. A sentiment felt throughout this entire country. Between 1964 and 1973, the Americans flew more than 500,000 missions over Laos, dropping more than 2.5 million tons of bombs. That's one bomb every 8 minutes, 24 hours a day for 9 straight years.
Lao PDR was subjected to a very heavy bombing campaign. And over those years, it is estimated that more than 2 million tons of bombs were dropped on the country. We know that still to this day, all 18 provinces of Lao PDR are contaminated.
It was a conflict that became known as the Secret War.
Everywhere, every place, houses were destroyed, our land was destroyed, livestock killed. We don't consider this as a secret war. We all see the consequences.
Say Samon has been doing this for 28 years. It's a painstaking task, using detectors to manually map every centimeter of the ground. On a normal day, her team finds around 10 to 20 cluster munitions. On a good day, more than 100. And considering only 1% of contaminated land has been cleared, she tells me that it is impossible to clear Laos of all the bombs dropped. But each bomb destroyed is potentially lives saved. So that explosion was from a bomb that we found in the grounds today. Now we are at a relatively safe distance, around 200 to 300 meters away. But to think that a child or a group of children could be playing or kicking these things around is just devastating. Children account for 40% of victims. The allure is fatal. a curse that lasts a lifetime. They say the body keeps a record of trauma and pain, but few would understand what this would feel like. Not knowing your children's faces, to live every day without sight, without a limb, with little hope.
The misery is intolerable. Blindness is like death. My daughters need to be my eyes. It's torture. Nothing can ever compare to this.
What becomes of war after war ends? After the last shots fired? After the last bombs dropped? What becomes of the people that try so hard to move on? Because for them, war never really ends. It silently lingers in rice fields, playgrounds, villages, ready to claim more innocent victims. Dusita Saogao, CGTN, Laos.
You're watching CGTN, still to come. President Macron hosts Narendra Modi at France's Bastille Day parade, but campaigners are unhappy at his choice of guest of honour.
Roger, Ricky, loud and clear.
We can try out the wild and crazy ideas.
Nothing can stop an idea whose time has come, and this idea is coming.
I actually feel quite comfortable in isolation.
We should all be very basic when we're trying to save the world.
Awesome!
We hope it will happen. We have to live in hope.
Facing the unknown is always difficult. In a world in turmoil, it's easy to lose orientation. But when the storms come, we have to see the possibilities. Reinvent. Find new opportunities. Discover a path forward. CGTN. See the difference.
This week on Razor, creating the power of the sun here on Earth.
We will have endless energy. Could replace the oil. It will for sure change our life, change the world a lot. We are working on this project. It's like when humans learn how to use fire. This is the second fire of the human in our history.
Hello, welcome back. A reminder of our top story. Southern Europe is scorched as the continent swelters on the brink of record high temperatures. Well, it wasn't a totally smooth ride for Emmanuel Macron at the Bastille Day celebrations in Paris. He was booed by some members of the public as he drove down the Champs-Élysées amid continuing anger over his pension reforms. And human rights campaigners have criticised his decision to invite Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi as guest of honour. Our correspondent Alex Cadier is live in Paris for us now. So, Alex, why was Prime Minister Modi chosen as guest of honour? Or equally, I could ask, why not?
Well, he was chosen as guest of honour because France is very, very eager to build on its existing relationship with India. It is 25 years since those two countries announced their strategic partnership. And if you look into the future, the American banking group Goldman Sachs says that the Indian economy will be the second largest by 2075. Now, clearly, the French want to get involved with that relationship. They want to build on that relationship on a number of sectors. Let's start with security and defence. A couple of days ago, or I should say yesterday, we heard from India that they would purchase 26 Rafale fighter jets from the French, as well as 3 submarines, and they want to build on that defence cooperation and defence collaboration. And we saw that embodied in the Bastille Day parade. It was led, the marching was led by the Punjab Regiment of the Indian Armed Forces. President Macron tweeting that they were very welcome, and also remembering the historic relationship that Indian troops fought alongside French ones in World War I. So that is looking back, but looking forward for the next 25 years, certainly a desire to work on things like tech, India's tech industry booming, working together on climate change, on geopolitical issues, and of course on security and defence. The French in particular see India as a very strong potential partner, a like-minded partner, a democracy that they can work with, and that's something President Macron was very keen to show today.
And Alex, this has been a turbulent time for President Macron, hasn't it? Can you give us a sense of how that's been playing out among the crowds there?
Well, it played out as he was driving down the Champs-Élysées, opening the procession for the Bastille Day parade. He was booed and he was cheered. So the French are vocal about their views in that, undeterred by the fact that it's the President of the Republic driving past. Some people booed him, some people cheered him on. That's kind of what we've come to expect with French crowds. Very clear, very vocal about how they felt. Obviously, it's been a dramatic few weeks, a tumultuous few weeks for the French president. We've seen protests after the police killed a 17-year-old teenager at a traffic stop just a few weeks ago, and that led to protests across the country, including pockets of violence and pockets of rioting. And that's something that President Macron has been very careful to avoid. Again, the French authorities having a very serious security situation across Paris, making sure that no flare-ups happen and trying to avoid any such protests. Some of the measures in place, for example, fireworks, personal fireworks, as we mentioned, are banned from use. That is to avoid people stocking up on fireworks and possibly using them in protest. So Emmanuel Macron, one thing to say as well is that traditionally the French president makes a speech on the 14th of July. Of course, it's a historic day. It traces all the way back to 1789, the start of the French Revolution. No such speech from President Macron today. He will be making remarks with Narendra Modi, the Prime Minister of India, but no official presidential speech on the 14th of July. We hear from the Élysée Palace that he'll speak in the next few days, but certainly a bit of a tricky situation for President Macron to deal with.
Alex Cadier in Paris, many thanks. Next, a mission to land on the moon's south pole has been successfully launched by India.
3, 2, 1, 0.
It's the first attempt by any country to explore that part of the lunar surface. The unmanned rocket is carrying a lander, a rover, and other research equipment, with the lander expected to touch down in August. A previous attempt by India failed in 2019 when the lander crashed. This is India's first major mission since the government announced policies aimed at encouraging private investment in the space industry.
Government of India now has announced its policy on the space, by which external companies or private companies can participate in the developmental activities, which would mean there will be larger potential for employment, as well as some innovative ideas can get a good shape. I hope that this will come through, and so in that sense I am saying that it will be a game changer.
Meanwhile, Japan has suffered a setback to its space ambitions. A new rocket engine exploded during testing, blowing off the roof of the test facility. No one was injured, though, in the accident. The new engine is designed for the next generation of Japan's Epsilon rocket, aimed at boosting the country's competitiveness in the global satellite launch market. The headlines again here on CGTN. Southern Europe is scorched as the continent swelters on the brink of record high temperatures. Pomp, ceremony and controversy. Pensions and human rights on the minds of the French as India's Prime Minister is guest of honour for Bastille Day. And that is The World Today. Thank you for watching. We're back with Global Business at the top of the hour. Coming up next, it's The Vibe. For now, from all the team in London, goodbye.
This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Today on The Vibe, a new exhibition featuring almost 200 photos taken by a Pulitzer Prize-winning photographer opened at the Museum of Art Pudong. A prominent Chinese archaeologist shares insights into the use of modern technology in his work and how to attract more young people to join the field. We meet a Lingnan painting master, Liang Shishong, who is now in his 90s and still remains a prolific painter. And we discover how one Nigerian musician is looking to make African classical music known around the world. Hello Beijing, hello world, welcome to The Vibe here on CGTN. I'm Louisa Lee coming live to you from the capital. Thank you for tuning in. And here on The Vibe, we cover the most exciting trends and the most inspiring stories capturing hearts and minds. Storytelling and photography go hand in hand, but a good photographer can deliver ideas, convey emotions, and narrate an event with a click of the shutter. As we often say, a picture is worth 1,000 words. Now, a new exhibition featuring photos from Pulitzer Prize-winning photographer Liu Hengxing has opened at the Museum of Art Pudong in Shanghai. Known for his candid and ground-level street images, Liu has an eye for interesting moments. Liu's photos, which mainly focus on ordinary people, depict a time of change, especially in China, where progress and development have been rapid. Now, let's take a look at his work, which has chronicled some historical turning points.
In the late 1970s, Liu Hengxing became the chief photographer for Time magazine and Associated Press to work in Beijing. He was among the first photojournalists to document China following the enactment of reforms.
Reports on a society need to focus on people because they are the society. When I was a photojournalist in China, I tended to focus on details. What's Chinese people's life like? How do they go on dates? How do the ladies have plastic surgeries? How do ladies get their hair done?
From celebrities to ordinary people, Liu's photographs were more than just on-the-scene reporting, but delivered authentic expressions of strong personal interest. He spent 3 decades documenting the modernization of China and how it changed the lives of ordinary citizens.
The achievements brought by China's reform and opening up cannot be explained with 1 or 2 photos. I've been keeping track of China's development in different periods. The exhibition with these photos tells a larger story to the world.
Liu's career as a correspondent was not limited to China. The exhibition includes Liu's documentation of historical moments he witnessed in the United States, India, and former Soviet Union. Many of the photos are being displayed for the first time.
I've been a photographer for half a century. There were many negatives of photos I took in various countries left in my suitcases. I've spent the last 4 to 5 years sorting them out.
We want people to learn more about what happened in China and overseas in the past few decades. And it will also bring back memories for many Chinese people.
The exhibition will run until December 17th. Zhang Hong, ICS for CGTN, Shanghai.
And that's something I would love to see. Next, with the National Archaeological Work Conference just wrapping up in Jinan, Shandong Province, we sit down with renowned Chinese archaeologist Fang Hui from Shandong University for a talk. Having dedicated himself to the field for decades, Fang shares insights into the use of modern technology and what's being done to attract more young people to join the practice. Let's take a listen.
Thank you, Professor Fang, for having this interview with us. When talking about archaeology, the first image comes to mind is the excavation of cultural relics. What are the working environments like and the daily assignments like for archaeologists?
Archaeology is hard work. It's just like a farmer to dig in the field. But it's a lot of fun. Every archaeologist wants to find, big discoveries, like big burials with bronze, with jade objects, and other things. But only small part of them can find this, because most of the site they deal with is the daily life remains of ancient people. You don't know what you will find. So that's most charming things for archaeologists. It's a hard work, but at the same time, it's a work worth to contribute their life to do.
What is the current research being conducted by the Shandong University?
Our field project continually for over 25 years. We cover 5,000 square meters area from the Lianyungang to Qingdao and to Weifang. Like in Longshan period, you can find so many sites. Nobody can image 4,000, 5 years ago, so many people living in that area. Just like a rural area of modern China. You have a feeling to communicate with our ancestors, with people who live in there 4,000 years ago.
How are modern technological means utilized in archaeological work, and what changes have they brought in the field of archaeology?
Scientific archaeology or science-based archaeology is become more popular in China. In laboratory, we call it the second step, information digging. In the field, that's the first step. Even the soil can tell you something about the environment. Our university have a big space of science-based archaeology laboratory, almost cover everything, to stone tool, to pottery, to bronze, iron, lacquer issues.
Professor Fang, you have said this before. Universities also have the responsibility to protect the cultural heritage and how to attract more and more young people to join the team.
We created a project, we call it a classroom, field school, and a laboratory education. It's not just read the ancient books. Ancient book is very important for archaeologists, particularly for students, for professors who want to study historical archaeology. But I want to say only a small part of ancient people's life can be read in the book. Very, very small. Most of the information has lost. So archaeology can allow you to look for these lost information underground. Archaeology is hard work, but gives you a lot of interesting things you can find you hope to spend with your whole life.
And what's the best way to preserve and promote folk music? China Media Group has launched a new program celebrating the vibrant culture of Chinese folk songs on Thursday. The music-themed extravaganza will be held in Zuochun County in Shanxi Province. Through the format of a music competition and reality show, the 10-episode program will tap into the cultural elements embedded in traditional folk songs. It aims to showcase a dynamic culture through the innovative development of young musicians. People can also send in their own recordings from their hometown, sharing the folk culture with the world through social media. And now it's time to jazz it up. What's the jazz music scene like in China? Well, after being introduced to the country in the 1930s, it has never lost its appeal, as a good jam never goes out of style. From backstreet bars to international festivals and now to a fusion of Chinese musicians and music elements, we can expect it to be all the more exciting. With signs pointing to resurgence, we dig deep into the scene to check out what's trending.
Jazz 对于音乐的这种热爱是一个进阶的过程。Jazz to me is bridging different music varieties together.
It's been a while for the jazz enthusiasts in Beijing to enjoy an offline show. The fusion concert was presented by famous Chinese pianist and composer Kong Hongwei and his Golden Buddha Jazz Band.
孔宏伟也是我们在选了好几个音乐人之后 觉得它最合适，因为它不仅有爵士乐的功底，同时也有中国文化和中国音乐的背景，更重要的是它原创性也很强。
Jazz was born on the streets of New Orleans, the most culturally diverse city in the United States in the late 19th century. The genre was initially originated in African American communities, but in the 1920s, it began to spread to other parts of the world, including China. In particular, the reputation of Paramount Hall in Shanghai soared in the 1930s. In the 1980s, the spark of jazz was rekindled in China and slowly began to develop in jazz circles in Beijing, Shanghai, and Guangzhou, and continued to spread to Chengdu, Shenzhen, Wuhan, and other cities. To learn more about the relationship between jazz and China, we invited 4 guests to explore this topic from the perspective of jazz promotion, music festivals, and artists themselves.
Well, I would say it's still in the early age, but its popularity is growing fast. So in the past 3 decades, jazz has become quite popular. There are several successful festivals all over China. I think nowadays you'll most likely find jazz clubs and bars in any major city around the country.
Music festivals such as Jay-Z Festival, Nine Gates International Jazz Festival, and Guangzhou Jazz Festival have been held for many years and have attracted more and more young music lovers. Among them, there's a newcomer, a so-called most familiar stranger to Chinese jazz enthusiasts, the Montreux Jazz Festival China, aka MJFC. The first MJFC staged a 4-day music carnival in Hangzhou.
Nowadays, I think it has become more of an international music festival with a lot of different other genres. That many of them are influenced in the evolution of the jazz in the 19th and the 20th century. Where East meets West has always been our mission and motto from day one. When we brought the Montreux Jazz Festival to China in 2021 for the very first time, bridging different cultures has always been my goal since setting foot into this beautiful country.
爵士乐呢，它是一个非常包容的一种风格，它能包容 classical， 也能包容这个民族啊，也能包容更多的一种音乐风格。爵士乐的魅力呢是即兴啊，就把自己的一些感受、音乐的体会，用音乐的语言来表达出来。Don't tell me not to fly, I simply got to. If someone's sick, excuse me and not you. Who told you you're allowed to rain on my parade? March my band down, help me mind drown. And if I find out you turn that back, sir, at least it didn't think he'd have to say.
近些年涌出了很多不同风格的爵士的乐队，比如说有拉丁风格的，然后有专门做 bossa nova 的乐队，然后有一些做传统的 standard 这个 swing， 然后还有我们现代的一些爵士乐作品。
The styles of jazz music are endless, as any country, traditions and music styles can influence the message of its music.
Music is a bridge. Musical exchange between China and the rest of the world isn't exactly new. People are able to see Chick Corea, Pat Metheny, Steve Smith, and other jazz legends in China. In recent years, the career choices for Chinese jazz musicians with an overseas education background have developed a new trend.
很多在国外学习的这些音乐人，他们回到国内，但是即使没有这个疫情，他们也会回来。虽然学习可以去外边，但是在中国才是他们的根嘛。音乐本身是一个桥梁要两边跑。你出去的时候就会你是中国音乐人的背景，然后回来的时候你会把这个你国外的学习的东西带回来。
对于一些国外回来的一些音乐人啊，或音乐专业的学生，那他们可以把一些在国外学到的音乐元素带到中国，然后去加入到他的创作中。我觉得这是一件注入新鲜血液的好事情。
Well, I think it's a really great thing. There is a saying
The artists can only create something good when they return to their own roots. So with people traveling overseas and living abroad, they will learn other cultures and maybe become more open-minded. But I think with remembering their Chinese roots and heritage, jazz will be blooming and become more and more popular among the people in China.
I simply gonna march, I had a drama now, nobody is gonna rain on
Still to come on The Vibe, we meet a Lingnan painting master, Liang Shixiong, who is now in his 90s and still a prolific painter. And we learn how one Nigerian musician is making African classical music known around the world. And you're watching The Vibe on CGTN. Welcome back. The Lingnan Painting School is a Chinese painting style that originated from Guangdong province in the 20th century. Considered to be progressive at the time, the art form is often connected to natural landscape with the usage of bold colors. Now, to better understand it, we meet with Liangnan painting master Liang Shixiong, who is now in his 90s. He has donated a large collection of his works to national galleries and museums. Liang believes that art is for everyone and not just for himself. Here is his story.
Born in 1933 in South China's Guangdong province, Liang Shixiong is regarded as a representative of the Lingnan Painting School. While inheriting the traditions, he has extensively absorbed the strengths of other art forms and expanded the expression of traditional Chinese painting. In 2023, Liang Shixiong and his family donated 779 pieces of his works and collections to the National Museum of China, including calligraphy, paintings, and manuscripts. At the National Museum of China, a staff member showed us works donated by Liang.
这张表现的是抗美援朝的军人转业后建设武冈，将一张淳朴仁厚、充满自豪感的面孔表现得生动鲜活。我们是相当于创作稿和宣传画都有收集了。
These works donated by Liang have been included in the National History and Culture Relics Rescue Project of the National Museum of China.
基本上这次涵盖了他一生创作的代表性的革命历史题材作品，反映了社会文化生活方面的点点滴滴，这个史料性和艺术性的双重价值的。
We meet Liang Shixiong and his wife in a residential community in Guangzhou. They have lived here for 26 years.
國家培養咗個幾十年，所以現在要回歸俾國家。呢批作品捐俾國家，説明咗人民承認。我又感覺到好榮幸。班次風雨迎春冷，一夜香花帶月開。
These couplets were written by Liang's father-in-law, Rong Geng.
这个就是说，无论在任何的情况，艰难困苦的情况，他是鼓励年轻人，无论在任何情况下，都不要怕什么困难，要去继续的努力的成长，努力的去开放。爸爸是用这种寓意来鼓励师兄，要不怕艰难困苦，要不怕风霜雨雪，来好好的进行你的工作，来去创作。
Rong Geng is a famous Chinese paleographer and calligrapher. In his later years, he donated artifacts he had collected to the country. Among them were nearly 200 pieces of bronzeware, making him the individual who has donated the largest number of bronzeware to the country. And nearly 1/10 of the paintings and calligraphy at the Guangzhou Museum of Art have been donated by Rong Geng. He has made great contributions to national culture. Liang Shixiong's art career is closely related to Rong.
有一次啊，將我啲畫啊，啲速寫啊、寫生啊，攞嚟俾佢爸爸睇，佢話畫都畫得唔錯，但係字啊唔得。佢話你字寫唔好，成唔到大家。
他就回家之后就拼命的来练习书法，练习书法写的那个手啊都肿了，手腕都肿了。有一次他把他一大沓书法拿去给我爸爸看，我爸爸只